495, 496, 497, 498, 499, 500. All right. Good afternoon, children. How are you? So, I want to talk to you today about some different things that will help you do your film analysis, your film study, okay? And I mean, it's all the critical literary analysis. It's all the same thing. I might use a different word every once in a while, but basically it's the same information, whether I call it a literary critical analysis or just a critical analysis. That said, first things first, Saturday afternoon around 5 o'clock, it became official. This is school for the rest of the year. So you guys want to make sure that you can figure out how to, I don't know, show up and actually do some work. Because these grades, they're going to stick. And this is how we're going to be able to do our work, okay? Anyway, I had a very hard time naming this because there was so much different junk going through my head that I wanted to try to put into the title. Ultimately, I just kind of settled for this, right? Because everything is always more than it seems. You know, Goldilocks and the Three Bears is not about a hungry little white girl who goes up into the bear's house. You know, there's different subtleties in it. Anyway, you can explore that in college if you want. But right now, let's go through some of this stuff here, right? Once you think about this, this is what we could call an aphorism, a truism. It's something that is almost indisputable. Stories do indeed create our reality. Think about it this way. If I split the atom, but I can't figure out how to write the story about how I split the atom, I may as well not have done nothing. You know what I mean? So stories are really, really important, whether they're nonfiction or fiction. But right now we're going to kind of focus on fiction. So let's go on ahead. All right. Well, at the very least, you know, our stories give us a way to leave our humdrum, mundane realities every once in a while, and you know, stuff like that. Of course, they entertain us, right? But then, at the most, what happens is it starts to sun shower, and I guess it's cool that you're under the tree. All right, anyway, but at the most important levels, the essential levels, and this is what I really believe, or else I would not spend my whole adult life studying literature and trying to encapsulate and share those lessons with kids, okay? Go back, please. Right? Because literature provides purpose. Your stories provide purpose, right? And on a different scale, they also kind of, they model expectations for behavior. You know, I mean, you hear a story about whatever. You know, you hear a story about how little Jimmy one day burned his hand reaching for the pot. Well, I mean, that story helps you figure out how not to touch the hot pot, and hopefully you don't get burned. So we can kind of learn what they call like vicariously. We learn through others, and that's one of the things that we can do through our stories too. Again, mostly fiction, but even nonfiction can tell us how we should live and model our expectations. Go on ahead. All right, so here is something that you can read. You don't have to take my word for it. Fiction is good for you. It helps build your empathy, helps build your intellect, and it helps you become more creative. Next. Okay, so just like, you know, Michael Jordan had Bill Russell, you know, just how, you know, a lot of folks nowadays, they always go back and they want to give somebody else some props. You know what I'm saying? Well, that's the same thing with me in my milieu, right? In my realm of the literature and stuff. I give these two guys mad props, okay? And you'll see over here why I do that. Well, Jung, he was a psychiatrist, and he came up with all kind of different concepts. One of them was the collective unconscious, which I'll let you try to figure that out. But in a nutshell, basically what is being said is that on a subconscious level, They are vestiges of our primordial experience as human beings and proto-humans that have lived on and inform our conscious understanding. Okay? And then we get archetypes, right? The archetypes are how the collective conscious tells us some of these different stories and releases some of these different concepts to us. And just because this is, psychiatry and psychology does not mean that you can't take some of these concepts and then apply them to literature, which is what I do. Okay? So then we get Joseph Campbell. Well, he was a professor of literature, right? And he studied so much, and other people studied so much, they realized that there was what we call a monomyth. There was one basic story that involved heroes and all that stuff, and you could see a pattern. Well, our boy Joseph Campbell, he wrote extensively about that pattern, and you'll hear it often referred to as the hero's journey. Next, please. Here's some other samples, references for you. Feel free to read them and educate yourself. Alright, so here's some useful concepts. This is what I want us to kind of think about. We got the archetypes, we got the monomyth, like I said, the hero's journey. We have symbolism. Notice the book here, right? And Bellman too. We got association. That's a relatively new concept that I'm going to explain to you a little bit today. But when you're doing a characterization of somebody, you look at what is around them, and that helps you determine what kind of character they are. It'll make sense in a little bit, I hope. Alright, and then we always need to be able to understand that the micro story can be applied on a macro level, and the macro story can be applied on a micro level, right? So in other words, it can be small and just be like a small group of people or just an individual, or it can apply to all of civilization, or it can be about all of civilization but then be applied to an individual. Alright, so next. What we're going to do is I'm going to use the first couple of minutes of Popeye. Actually, we're not even going to look at that much of it, right? What we're going to do, though, is we're going to look at the opening credits for just a little bit, and then I'm going to go through these different concepts and explain them. Alright, so let's switch over, please, to the video. You couldn't get that Bobo stuff off you? So this is pretty interesting because it starts off in the cartoon world. Alright, we're about to get ourselves upended here. No less than our main character tells us this is screwy.
Hey, what's this? One of Bluto's tricks? I'm in the wrong movie.
Oop. Archetype, trickster. Alright, so we have lightning, we have thunder, we have storms, we've got the tumultuous sea. Okay? When we look at those symbolically, we're going to understand different aspects of that. And if we understand that the lightning and the thunder are associated with Popeye, we get real deep then. Okay? You know, whenever you call it this video on your own, you'll be able to see things better. But there's Popeye right there, bobbing up and down on the sea. We call it the sea of consciousness. Lots of times the sea has always been symbolized as a place where you can find out more about yourself, right? I mean, and it represents the consciousness. So that what is above the ocean is what we realize as our, conscious world, and then there is the vast subconscious just below the surface of those waves. All right, so let's stop this then and let's go back. All right, so as far as archetype goes, well, there's Wimpy. He's a trickster. Okay, always talking about I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. You're broke. Get a job, mother. Right? And then we have the maiden here, who is Olive Oil. Popeye is our hero. Okay, and then, oh, we got a father here. We got like an old woman here. Okay, so then all these different types of archetypes are moving around. The hero's journey. Well, I mean, when you explore that on your own, you'll understand. I don't want to blow the whole story for you, but Popeye is indeed starting his journey. Okay, he is leaving one realm of consciousness and crossing the threshold into another. Once he leaves his home, that very tumultuous sea, right, with nothing but the thunder and the lightning to keep him company, that's whenever he's coming into his journey again, because this is really just a part of his continuing journey. When we talk about the symbolism, okay, so we're going to talk real quickly about the symbolism of the sea. I already mentioned that as a house of the unconscious, right? A way to find out about stuff. Then we're going to talk about the lightning. Well, if I'm not mistaken, that's how Zeus used to punish folks, right? He would take his lightning bolts, throw them out at people so he could let them know that they was doing messed up stuff, right? And then you'll see echoes of that also in the Judeo-Christian ethic. Now, to further go into the symbolism, we have the thunder, which if you were able, like I am, to go into my symbolism book, you'd see that oftentimes the thunder is referred to as the voice of God. Okay, so then it's something that is not to be disregarded. Now, when we go to the whole association, well, when we put the lightning and the thunder and understand that it is associated with Popeye, then Popeye is all of a sudden elevated to a very mythic, almost deified character, okay? Popeye is no one to be trifled with. What, would you be out there in that ocean that he was in? No, of course not, because you ain't Popeye. But we can learn and we can use this story as a model for how we should be living, okay? Now, the micro and the macro. Well, the macro right now would be this other crazy world that exists where Popeye is. But we take those interpersonal relationships and then we can turn it down into the micro level, which would be how we can utilize the story. Okay? Hope you was paying attention. If you weren't, you know what you could do? Rewind. Alright, so let's go. So, you'll see here, I'm trying to share with you a little bit of the important things that literature does for me, right? It humbles me. It inspires me, right? It models interpersonal relationships. In other words, like if I'm having a rough time with somebody, I can read a story about how people get together or don't get together, and I can study the pitfalls and the expectations. I can figure out how best to get along with all kind of other people, all by reading some different stories and stuff. Now, the stories, well, that's just make-believe. That doesn't even matter. It ain't nothing. Nah, man, these stories, they resonate in reality. Okay? Right? I mean, let's do Godzilla, for instance. Okay? Now, Godzilla, the big green monster that shoots the atomic fire, well, that's not real. But when you think about what Godzilla represents, the metaphor of Godzilla, you understand that the big green monster with the atomic fire is the United States of America. And more closely, the Army of the United States of America, which was occupying Japan when that film was made. Alright, so then like, you just kind of got to dig a little bit deeper and you see all of these different connections that can be made, right? The biggest thing is you got to give a hoot, right? You're not going to do a good job on any of this stuff if you don't care about it. And if you got to fake it till you make it, well then do so. You know what I'm saying? Pretend to care about it until you do learn to care about it. Now, literature, nonfiction even, right? They inform our existence, my existence specifically. I figure out, well, what's real? I figure out what's not real. I figure out what I can use. I figure out what I can't use. You know what I mean? And then I use all that different stuff to help chart the path of my existence. So, try to get some exercise. Try to do some work. Me and Bellman, deuces, we're out.